For the month of October, we're looking at 5 horror and Halloween classics to determine if they are required viewing. This week, we're taking a trip within the woods with Sam Raimi's directorial debut, the classic cult hit, The Evil Dead. When 5 young people and Bruce Campbell's chin visit a lone cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway, they discover the Necronomicon Ex Mortes, roughly translated as the Book of the Dead. When its blood-inked passages are recited by a tape recorder translation, they are soon attacked by sensual trees and POV camera shots before they each begin to succumb one by one to grotesque demon possession. To say The Evil Dead is a visually driven film is an understatement. It's one of the most innovative, inspiring, and theatrically brutal independent films ever produced. Once you get past little things like multiple dismemberments, graphic tree, let's just say #tree2,
encounters tree2, this guy,
and a high school swimming pool's worth of blood. It's actually quite a beautiful film. From a cinematography point of view, at the very least, it truly feels like the most gifted film student picture ever made, from the composition of the shots, the simple but brilliant setups and payoffs, and the cacophonous editing and sound design, like a window into legitimately dangerous production that you weren't perhaps meant to see. Now, Kyle, you have previously stated that you had only caught parts of this film before tonight's viewing. What was your first impression of The Evil Dead?
Yeah, no, I'd only caught a few scenes before watching it for this production, we'll say, which is already uplifted a ton by the use of the term cacophonous. I don't know what that means, but it sounds effing amazing. And that's what some of the imagination is in this film. Listen, I'm not a horror guy by any stretch of the imagination. There are times I'm just like, come on, guys, really? With the blood and the Olympics, where's Michael Phelps? Damn it. But you mentioned swimming pools. I thought that was appropriate, but that
would be a hell of a record.
That completely redefines the term blood sport, I suppose. At any rate, you mentioned it being visual. It's more than just saying, oh, there's a lot of visuals. No, there's so much communication there. Listen, if I'm going to point out how The Lion King is done just with animals and movement and expression, this is done with even less. And it's bleeding brilliant. And you're talking about looking into things from a window. How about smashing through one of those mother effers like you're a damn falling tree? How about that, Demosthenes?
It's kind of funny that you mentioned The Lion King, especially since we've covered so many Disney films on required viewing this year. So we go from rated G land to our first NC-17 film, which is actually brilliant, bloody brilliant, because Bruce Campbell in a way kind of provides that bridge before demolishes and they're all stuck in an evil cabin. Because Bruce Campbell, I remember one of the first times I saw him after I saw Briscoe County Jr. way back in the day was the remake of The Love Bug. Yes, they remade The Love Bug starring Bruce Ash Williams Campbell, and I expected more carnage. That's all I could say.
I don't know. Maybe somebody should have Sam axed that idea. But what I'll say is this: I didn't walk in to this production thinking that we would compare to The Lion King, but I just can't wait for reckoning. Anyways, some of the sounds in this damn picture though blew my effing mind, and I'm not, other than some of the effects and objects moving around, some of these voices it's going on with the Deadites, man. Listen, not a fun time at all. And really the scariest one in my mind, the most troubling, was the one that was also arguably the least violent, and that's just Linda with the crazy, just no.
Linda is by far the creepiest one. She is the lightest, she is the most comedic, but I think that's part of what makes her simply terrifying. A lot of people tend to say that the original Evil Dead is campy horror, that there are many unintentional laughs in this, and a lot of people credit the Linda Deadite specifically. My big argument is I found Linda as an uninteresting character until she turned into a Deadite. Then all of a sudden, she elevates a whole new level. It's such a fun performance. In many ways, she has a cruel mix of utter horror and mirth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, you mentioned the character being uninteresting, but I can definitely tell you some of the scenes, especially like with the whole closed eyes pretending thing that they start with when she's like still a chick and like she and Ash are like, oh, I love you so much. Oh, I'm sleeping, but I'm going to give you something.
I call that the eye game.
Yes, the eye game is, I'm going to just say it, the most psychologically creepy thing in the movie. You may be able to find something better in my mind, depending on the day of the week, but it's always going to be in the conversation that moment.
That really speaks to the brilliant setups and payoffs this film has. The eye game being one of them. Another one I like to point out is the overhead shot with the keys. When Scott first arrived at the cabin, he reaches overhead, tries to find the keys, and he has trouble discovering which of the keys actually opens the door. Perfectly sets up the later scene where Cheryl is trying to do the same thing. Now, I think it's a big cliche in horror films, and I absolutely hate it. Whether it's a horror film or whether it's an action film. In fact, the only one I actually approve of it in is Back to the Future. When the character gets into the car, tries to turn it on, and it doesn't turn on. And they're just sitting there, they're revving, it can't turn on. This is the non-ignition version of that scene. But it works very, very well because they set it up logically.
Yeah, no, I see that too. And I mean, listen, we're sticking with visuals and setups. I know it's a little bit obvious, but the whole drawing of the face in the book was something that was just an awesome reveal in itself. And since we're transitioning to fine reveals at this point, man, something that I think the reveal of the first Deadite where they're playing the psychic gang, and then all of a sudden from the other room, two spades, and she's just calling it all out, and then you're like, holy jeez. And then for all the weapons and things that happen in this movie, the most gruesome thing, in my opinion, comes with simplicity and minimalism that you get in horror films, as well as, you know, these swimming pools of blood, is the stabbing with the pencil. I thought was the most moment in the movie.
Oh, I agree. It's because it feels real. It feels palpable. A lot of the scenes in this film, probably just because of the way that they filmed it. I mean, they spent days out in the woods. I mean, Sam Raimi was staying up 24/7 trying to finish this film. It feels just as dangerous watching it as it was to make. That scene with the book, which is the first true experience that a character has with the supernatural in this film. Man, if it was me, maybe this is why I would be terrible in a horror film. But if it was me, the moment that happened, I'd be out of there. No passages would ever have been recited. No tape recorders would ever have been played. I see myself drawing a strange book with a demonic, deformed Donald Duck face on it. I'd be the hell out of there.
I don't know what just happened, but I don't really care. I'm get the hell up out of F this jazz. I'm out.
I mean, but it does follow, and I think to a degree makes fun of many of the stupid horror tropes that we see. They go outside in the woods alone. They split up after the gore fests. They read from a book bound in human flesh and inked in blood. But you know, at the end of the day, it's part of the fun.
The cornerstone of every nutritious breakfast.
In fact, it plays with the horror tropes in many, many delicious ways. And one of my favorite tropes tends to be the so-called last girl surviving. And in this case, it's Bruce Campbell, who's oddly enough named Ashley.
Stop.
A girl's. I wonder if that was part of the joke. But since we brought up the great Chin himself, let's talk a little bit about Bruce Campbell's performance. Because when people think of Evil Dead, and when people think of Ash, the character, one word tends to come in mind: groovy. This Ash ain't groovy. In fact, he's kind of a dweeb. He gets beat up by shelves and furniture at multiple points in this film.
First, I'm glad you called that out, because as I'm watching this, like, so because Bruce Campbell as a human being is pretty tall, pretty big guy, you know, like, I'm wondering if, like, on the first take where he's bumping into a shelf, because he's so big, when that happens and he bumps against it, it inevitably falls down. Like, I don't know if that was planned, but like it happened the first time and they're just like, you know what? Go with it. Give me more, you know? And so, like, I mean, I can sympathize with that as a big guy myself. But like, listen, this is just that Ash Williams before all of it went down. Like, I could argue an alternative title for Evil Dead is Ash Sees Some Cheese.
Well, you know, I kind of liken this to El Mariachi going on into Desperado. You see an evolution of both characters from these dweeb guys into total badasses.
I'm with you on the El Mariachi more than anything else too. Like, at first the guy's actually a fireball musician before he's walking around with guitar cases full of ordnance and ammunition. You know what I'm saying?
The first time I saw this film, and I saw Army of Darkness before I saw the earlier two films, so I had a very, very different expectation of what Ash was, and it took me a little while to really respect the performance that Bruce Campbell gives in this film, because based on, as you just said, his stature and his one-liner strengths that we have seen in many other productions, he sells the performance here.
There's plenty of there in this first movie where Bruce is actually taking in his surroundings and kind of freaking out. And here's the thing. I like the fake where it comes out and it looks like Scott's going to be the, you know, don't worry, guys, I got this, with like 47 deadites popping out of some evil looking tree. Well, okay,
well, he's the one that takes charge. He's the one that first kills one of the deadites.
And the fact that he's kind of doesn't hurt things either. And like, I got to be honest, when he gets his, didn't exactly feel bad about it, you know, and when he gets it again as a deadite, didn't exactly feel bad about it, you know,
because he's an asshole. He's
a complete douche. Absolutely.
He's kind of the darker, douchier version of what Ash later becomes, because Ash later, I mean, the popular iteration of him is kind of this almost douchebag buffoon with the chainsaw hand and the shotgun. But at the very end of the day, he still has a good nature about him. He still has, dare I say, he still has his soul. The entire freaking trilogy and TV series, could be argued, is a fight for Ash to retain that soul.
I don't think that's figurative. I think that's literal.
We mentioned earlier the visual atmosphere of this film, and I'm going to let you guys in on a little bit of the background to how I prepare for required viewings, especially since there have been very few films that we have covered on the show that I hadn't seen before. Now, I'm always excited to see or discover for myself a new classic. But as I'm watching a film, I'm not just taking notes on what I'm going to say on this show and so forth, but I'm also making editing notes. So I want to keep this shot. I want to edit that shot in. When I talk about this, I'm going to include that. Usually I get about half a page's worth of notes. If it's a James Bond film, because we just started that series, I really don't have to take many notes, because I fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, I have many of those films memorized. Evil Dead, however, I think reached a new apex for how many notes. I'm holding right here the literal notes, the shot list, the nearly two full pages of shots I want to include in this episode. If it wasn't for the YouTube coming after me at this particular point, I think I'd be forced to screen the whole film and do this episode as a commentary.
I mean, but listen, even as the default, there's that many moments with the way the cameras just show, and the fog and the house and all just, and the movement of it. Like, listen, I cited, you're going to come across an episode in the future where I reference a camera shot in Briscoe County Jr. that I thought that I credited with something looking similar to the arrow trick in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. But now I'm realizing probably not the inspiration.
No, this directly inspired the arrow trick in Prince of Thieves. Actually, to be more specific, a certain shot in Evil Dead 2. but I'll get to that when I get to that. But no, the shots in this film, I mean, you can, when I said at the beginning of this episode that this feels like the greatest student film project ever, it's because it's almost like you can see behind the mind of a visual director saying, this will be a good shot. This will be a good shot. But I think what differentiates Sam Raimi from any of those other auteur student directors is he does so with a purpose. The combination of the visuals, the editing, the overall pacing, how the pacing keeps accelerating along with the film's frenetic cinematography. By the end of the film, it becomes a complete disorienting mix of angles, sound effects, zooms, odd POV shots, all culminating in a palpable sense of danger and, more importantly, a loss of identity.
A cacophony of palpable senses of danger. Do not make it singular, sir.
This is clearly the most verbose review of The Evil Dead on YouTube.
No, it's the most bloviated, I can tell you that.
Indeed. I ponder what the ramifications of such a review would yield.
You're exacerbating my partisan acrimony, Demos.
Touché, good sir.
But the closing shot, where it chases down Ash is awesome in and of itself, no question. Some of the stuff where they cut away and cut around all the boards falling off the bridge, because, actually making a bridge fall takes a budget. No, and I mean, I make that joke, but you get so much good work out of this movie and more creativity out of this movie and the genre in general because of the lack of budget associated with these films, right? So it forces creativity and you get some good work here. Definitely what happened.
I mean, that's how Jaws was born.
Bingo,
I think the best thing about Jaws is the fact that you don't see the shark for most of the film. By the time you see the shark, and it is kind of a fakish effect, but it's built so much fear and respect for this creature that by the time you see it, you're sold. It doesn't matter that it looks kind of fake. You're sold on its danger because you've seen it firsthand. There's
nothing intimidating about Vito Corleone, but eventually you realize there's so much respect around him. Sure, he looks like he has the jowls of a bulldog, but he could still F you up. He's the Godfather. Same thing with Jaws. The horrible mechanical machine. But I see here that you're shoveling some chum into the water. So I am going to lunge and attack you with my large teeth. And maybe then you will respect me in the ocean water.
Vito is, dare I say, intimidating from his very first scene because he clearly hired a lighting director to light up his office. They couldn't afford to show a bridge collapse. So what did they do? They show the remnants of the bridge clawing out like a giant monstrous hand to just visually telling you that you're within evil's grasp. And it's a far more terrifying visual than seeing a bridge fall apart.
It was literally a bridge over troubled waters. Hey, Demos?
Were you going to say River Kwai? Because I kind of...
No. Oh, God. What the bleep? No.
Well, you could argue that the River Kwai is a troubled water.
Uh-oh. I like how I've begun doing the voices so you don't have to bleep it, air quotes.
Well, in all fairness, you sound more like Mickey Mouse in my Mickey Mouse sound clip, so it works. It works very, very well. Now, obviously, at this particular point, I think we've clearly established that we can go on and on talking about this film. But I think I'm just going to jump right to the chase and ask the question, is The Evil Dead required viewing? I'm very intrigued to hear what Mr. I Hate Horror has to say about this film.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, listen, all the trash I talk, I hate horror. Let's keep in mind, this time last year, I did, in fact, make The Exorcist required viewing, right? So I'm not a complete heretic. And, by the way, Demos...
Which is funny because Exorcist 2 is literally called The Heretic.
Nice.
That's the subtitle. I'm not kidding.
Dig it. I was not prepared. You knocked me off kilter there. That's wildly appropriate. First of all, saying cut to the chase in a movie where the bridge is busted so they can't escape, really kind of an asshole move by you, Demos, gotta tell you. Anyway, so...
I wasn't going to take the trail. I saw what happened to that one person.
Right? That's where it all went wrong. No, I guess they chased him through the house a little bit though. Doesn't let. Nonetheless, let's.
With the camera mounted on the bicycle, no less. The way they filmed this with the budget they had is just, it blew me away. But go on.
Right. No. So listen, man. I gotta tell you. First of all, I don't know whether they didn't have Sam's back then, so I don't know how they bought Kool-Aid in bulk. But what I will say is this. I am not a horror guy. That was the lead here. We knew that was going into it. There were certainly some moments where I'm just like, with the blood and the gore, I'm like, okay, that's a bit much. And like, there's some moments in there where one of the deadites hit somebody and all I could picture is, pin smack your ass, yeah, and I had fun with it. But not all the time. Like there's plenty of times, as air quotes campy as this is supposed to be, there was genuine horror here. There was a good element of scary. No, really. I mean, you could argue there's some cheap jump scares in it, but this movie does not rely on that.
It earns those jump scares, I would argue.
But that being said, there's some moments in this movie that are physically uncomfortable to watch. Like, how can I make something required when the experience in question is physically debilitating to one to partake in it? So, I mean, I'm going to recommend it from the standpoint that as horror movies go, this is pretty effing good. The visuals and all that would be beautiful if it wasn't a horror movie. But the some of the sounds, I mean, like at some point, I'm just like, okay, enough of this. Jeez.
So you kind of feel like Ash when you just started punching it repeatedly.
Hey, listen, I'm glad I didn't have a hands on a boomstick. Anyway,
I'm not a big horror fan. If anything, there are a few elements in especially in modern day horror films I'm not a fan of because I think they tend to be what I call cheap scares. Yeah. The overuse of jump scares primarily. Excessive gore. Gore by itself isn't scary. In fact, I kind of find it annoying when it's there in place of a scare.
I'm glad you brought this up. You helped me find a great way for me to explain what I'm talking about by physically uncomfortable. And granted, Evil Dead doesn't do this, so that's why I didn't think of it. But like what you're talking about is another element of the physically unenjoyable to watch stuff. Like you're just making the adrenaline flow and making my reflexes go. You're not building any suspense. Demos, there are movies that are actually, air quotes, scarier by Alfred Hitchcock than some of the modern that does these cheap scares that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, very, very much so. But Hitchcock, and the reason I think that Hitchcock and many of the horror films and thrillers that I tend to respect is that they're psychologically scary, or even more so, things that can actually happen in the real world. It places you into the shoes of the lead characters. If this can happen to him, it can happen to me. And knowing my life and my history and all the crazy shit that's happened to me, it's probably going to happen to me. This film has two elements that by themselves I wouldn't like. On top of that, I'm not a big fan of #Tree 2 scenes. See my review of The Wizard of Oz. No, I'm kidding. But oh my But I respect this film for many, many reasons. Primarily, every single time I watch it, I get something new out of it. Not necessarily as far as scares, but this film inspires me to be a better filmmaker. Every single time I watch this film, I am intimidated and challenged to up my game. I think that even if you take the question aside from whether or not this is required viewing for the general public, if you're a film student, there is no question that this film is required viewing. Yes. I think you could agree with me on that.
Right. No, indubitably.
As a horror film, it definitely shook things up. It set a new standard. The talent displayed in this film, despite the fact that it's not the type of film that it gravitates towards, it's striking to me. It's striking enough for me to definitively call it required viewing. Because if this film can make somebody like me who doesn't gravitate towards these type of films get engaged as much as I have and be as excited to talk about it as I have, it's doing something right.
Hey,
required.
I respect your point of view. I have no problem with you saying that. I mean, if I could get past, you know what? If you're all good with making yourself physically uncomfortable to go through all that, good luck to you, mother fireball. That's all I can say.
The only thing I'd push back to with that argument, I respect that argument too. I understand that there are films for everybody, and I'm never going to tell somebody that they have to watch a film that makes them uncomfortable. However, and I don't want to compare this to the films I'm about to compare them to, but just on the level of discomfort alone. I don't necessarily enjoy watching Requiem for a Dream or Schindler's List. They make me more uncomfortable than Evil Dead because of the reality that, as we said before with Hitchcock, that they are set in. And in Schindler's List case, historical reality. It honestly, that's one of the most terrifying films ever made, period. But they are masterful films, and their intent is to make you uncomfortable. This film's intent is to achieve what it's achieving in you, Kyle. I probably will never watch Requiem for a Dream again, if not for maybe if we cover it on the show later. Schindler's List, we're definitely going to cover at one point. I don't enjoy watching that film for the same reason, because it succeeds.
Right. And victim of its own success is a fine phrase to use here. I got no problem with that.
I don't know if I'd use that phrase, because when I think the word success, I think of monetary value. But I see what you're saying as far as successfully achieving what it's trying to do.
Yeah. 100%. It does. I know that's normally implied with fiscal, but hey, folks, look in your dictionary. Success doesn't necessarily relate to money, you know.
So overall, I would say The Evil Dead required viewing. I am excited to hear what your thoughts are on Evil Dead 2, especially because it could be argued that every film in this series almost fits into its own subgenre in a way. It makes it a very intriguing study. So tune in next week where we're going to cover Evil Dead 2. And while you're at it, stick around. We're covering Briscoe County Jr. every single week. We're doing episode reviews if you want more Bruce Campbell. And if we're going to do Evil Dead 2, there's this little film out there called Army of Darkness I think we need to take a trip to. So stay tuned.